Because, you know, when the media starts to listen and starts to show interest, it means that there's a grassroots movement. When the media is no longer afraid, really I'm saying afraid, to put an alternate before the people, it means that Canada is becoming more free.
Oh, cannabis, our home and native plant, to free resource, reduce our need for wood, for medicine and clothing, food, oil, and fuel for all. Oh, cannabis, we stand on guard for thee.
We got the greatest cause that there is in the world. Pot. Of all the plants the government of America could outlaw and force the rest of the countries, such as Canada, to start outlawing and keep against the law, there is no plant on earth even close to pot.
There's a very obnoxious element coming into the picture here. This is going into politics now. If you care to talk about that too?
Stop the hypocrisy that has been going on for so many years, and that we should go back to the way we were doing things in the past. We don't really want legalization, we want re-legalization. Because hemp was growing all over the prairies in the Midwest at the beginning of the century.
If you don't put up a fight, all freedoms are going to be lost. And the freedom, first of all, to outlaw the synthetic and legalize the natural, that we even have to say legalize the natural is disgusting. That we have to even think about legalizing the natural. The natural cannot be made illegal. You have to be one ignorant son of a bitch to make the natural illegal.
But then we heard that hemp was criminalized in 1923, and all this time there was no action taken. But it was unlawful. And then we heard people smoking marijuana to get a little bit on the high side.
Prohibition in Canada began essentially as a racist measure. In Vancouver in 1907, there was some race riots. The white folk of Vancouver gathered at Laurel Park. They're probably drunk and went and thrashed Chinatown. Chinese males came over from the gold rush and the railway, and they were stuck here basically, and they were opium smoking. And a couple of the places that got thrashed were opium dens. Mackenzie King, who was then Labour Minister, came out to come up with a solution of it for this and make reparations. So he put in an act in Parliament, the Opium and Narcotics Act, that basically made it illegal to possess. In 1923, cannabis was added to that same act without debate in Parliament. And so it was essentially racism that started the prohibition thing in Canada.
Why was it banned? That's a question I used to think about a lot. And it came up to two answers. And I honestly cannot be sure which answer is correct or if they're both correct. It was banned by the government because black people in the United States, it was reported that smoked this evil weed from Mexico called marijuana would do the worst crime in the world. Black people would actually step on a white person's shadow. Jim Crow laws were laws that black people and Mexicans couldn't break. And if you stepped on a white person's shadow, his shadow, they could haul you off, take you to jail without a trial for 10 days. You had to be in jail for stepping on a person's shadow. Well, you couldn't have that in good old America. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is DuPont, which was the largest user of hemp in the world. They made all their dynamite with hemp. they made paint with hemp, had come up with synthetics, and they wanted it out. And DuPont, the largest maker of marijuana products in the world, said, let's outlaw it. And every congressman that was on their payroll, which was damn near every single one of them, voted unanimously to outlaw the #1 plant on the earth without discussion. It's marijuana, no matter whether it was hemp or not, and they had no more competition. There was nothing to get rid of. They couldn't get nylon in unless they could get hemp out, and they outlawed it. But 4 years later, they allowed it back in for the war, to make the parachute webbing, to make the ropes.
Why are there suddenly in the past, say, 10 or 20 years or so, all these anti-marijuana, supposedly scientific studies? I got the federal government to give me the list of their studies and explanations of where they were basing their information, and I analyzed that all in terms of true scientific standards, which it didn't hold up very well, I must add. It did, in fact, not at all. The only thing that held up was the possibility of bronchitis, which had been established 100 years earlier. So in the past 20 years, the only new evidence was something that was 100 years old. Beyond that, there was a lot of charades and farce that pretended to be science, and it was just a matter of contrived experiments to create a negative result. And once you look at the scientific method, you realize there's nothing to it.
To expose that, the powers that be, they don't like that, of course not.
"20 years ago, in the 1970s, the ecology was not part of the picture as it is today. I believe myself that this will make the big difference. We're talking about marijuana, but we are talking about hemp. Marijuana was only the smokescreen to stop the industrialization of hemp for paper, fuel, fabric, and medicine.
I have found a company, EcoSource Paper, and it's entirely tree-free paper made of hemp and cereal straw right now. I like to introduce this paper especially to Canada, because I feel that's what we need to replace some of our wood pulp paper. We have other means to save our forests, and I like to have it seen as the paper for the future.
That's what we want. We want it to be something that all of Canada can participate in. And unless all of Canada does participate in it, we are again the lost souls of the world. We're so rich, we're poor, we have nothing.
It's kind of an interesting situation where you have so much hype on hemp right now, but there's not the volume that there could be in actual hemp production, because we have to bring it all in. That's what a lot of the interests or opposed to pot fear, because we can overnight replace the cotton market and the oil market and all that. I think that it's an expanding market, it's an exploding market. I'd like to see everybody get into it, and especially get into it on a growing locally, producing locally, and maybe selling nationally kind of basis. I think we have to think big. We have to think really big in the hemp business, because we're talking about retooling society. We're talking about retooling our entire economic base. So the sooner you get into it, the richer you'll be making money from hemp in your spare time. So that's the spiel on that.
And these are really, really good quality, even down to the last detail. If you look at the buttons, like they're all really stylish and really well made together. The hemp material is really good. Stuff like this you can just wash like any other fabric, and it's really strong. It's way stronger than cotton. It lasts you a whole lot longer, and they're soft, really soft and comfortable, and they soften up more as you wash them.
Nice. Perfect.
We are barging right into the hot issue of this whole domain deal.
There's no justice on their side. There's either ignorance, and I prefer to believe they're ignorant than they consciously know this, because if they consciously know that, and I ever find out, I'd put them in prison for a good long time. For somebody to consciously know that hemp is good and to keep it from you is to take your money and steal it as a government employee, using that money that you paid in taxes, and to work against you is against the law. You cannot take money and hide information, deliberately hide information. So they better come clean, because I know a lot of you are going to be mad when you get out of jail, and you're going to become full citizens, and you're going to want to put a lot of politicians in jail who first knew this but wouldn't stand up to tell anybody else, and continue to vote for laws that were harmful to people that got busted with pot and put them in jail after you knew this information. You've got to go to jail. This can't happen in a free society.
Know what it's like to be dragged in front of courts and have your professional credentials on the line and the possibility of losing their right livelihood, the same way as what they've done to us. I'm not one of these people who says, well, forgive and forget. I say there's some heavy dues that got to be paid by the other side, and I say it's time we start charging those dues.
The war on drug is actually promoting what the newest drug is, and by then giving the information to the kids what to look for. We are looking at the war on drug as being a job creation program. There's too many people involved with the present status quo. This is why we are facing the tremendous uphill battle for information.
Apart for easy cleaning, and they totally come apart. They're windproof. You can keep your extra pot in there, so as you smoke your dope, it resonates. It's really awesome. It's a good pipe. It's called a credit card pipe, and it's that thin. It's really small. These are from England, I believe. And when you smoke, it's got all these channels, so your smoke goes through there. It's like a crop circle. It's magnetic. These are really expensive. They go for $70, and they are selling. They're not my favorite, but the casing slides open, and you've got a nice one-hitter pipe. We've got other pipes, like handmade pipes like this one, for example, and it opens up, and it's got a little stash spot, so again, your pot resonates as you smoke. So that's a really cool pipe as well. We carry hitter boxes. These are great as well. How they work is you twist the top. There's two spots. You keep your pot in there, and there's your hitter. When you want to choke, what you do is you take it, pack it in, and your pot goes into the end, and then you just smoke like that, and you get a single toke. This is one of the Florida Chills bombs. It's plastic, so it's unbreakable, and when you smoke it, there's no carburetor, but you take the pipe end out, and the oxygen goes in, so you get a good hit.
It's how we all benefit, everybody benefits, by restoring hemp to our society in a very rounded method, instead of trying to come up with a contrived band-aid approach where you allow industrial but not personal, or medical but not personal, or personal but not any of the others. I mean, having a comprehensive, holistic approach to the subject, that we all benefit from that. And so, as I say, in a nutshell, I ground people on the possibilities, what you can do to make money right now, the economic realities of today, the possibilities of the future, and how we can change the system to benefit the people instead of benefiting a few special interests.
Hemp paper, 1932 is written. Look at that ink, eh? Look at it. It's red too. Someone read that many times. Chinese book in How Teaching. Safe Methods of Business in Chinese. Presumption of law pertaining business papers. 130-year-old Bible. No. Oh, the sun and the moon and the stars. 130-year-old book. 160-year-old book. History of the Inquisition. Bibles weren't allowed 160 years ago to be written on hemp paper.
Those stores are opening up that sell hemp, speak hemp, and marijuana. The flowering top of hemp, God love it because it's the best healing on earth for your glaucoma, for your asthma, for your multiple sclerosis, for your chemotherapy vomiting from your nausea, and being able to have an appetite to eat. The munchies are really an important thing, at least to neutralize the feeling you can't eat when you're getting chemotherapy, chemical therapy. But when you get hemp, and you smoke hemp, nobody has ever died from hemp in the vast history of hemp. In all the years, nobody has ever died from hemp except being shot by the cops, except being put in jail by the government. Marijuana extends life. Governments shorten life.
I feel that Canada is a great place to grow hemp and produce paper. I feel that we can really create a new economy in Canada by having a hemp production diversification, which is going back to communities and giving us the money back what we so badly need. We need more jobs. This can all be done by having the hemp here grown in Canada.
Hemp responded to that. This is scientific research, and it has been proven. Hemp, or rather ailing bodies, responded to the therapeutic value of hemp.
Hello. What we've got here is some Hungry Bear Seedy Sweeties. The main ingredient is hemp seed, which of course is a complete protein. It's high in globular edestin, which means it's the most edible type of protein. It's also very rich in essential fatty acids. Essential fatty acids are important for immune system response. They're raw materials for hormone-like substances, nervous system, and prevention of degenerative diseases. Now, linoleic acid is very common in a lot of our foods, and we usually get by with it. But phenolenic acid is what is very uncommon, but our body needs it in our common foods. Hemp seeds are very rich in that.
That the hemp seed is the most, and the hemp oil is the most beneficial hemp food in the world because it boosts your immune system more strongly than anything else.
A lot of people talk today about hemp as a way to save the world, and some people would say that that's an exaggerated position. To a certain extent, it's not an exaggerated position as much as it is a matter of a rhetorical device to explain a very basic environmental situation, which is basically that hemp, when it's planted into the soil, it grows in the temperate and the tropical climates with very little help from people. In fact, it grows wild, just to get right to the crux of the issue. It can sustain itself. Hemp patches from World War II are still being eradicated in the United States because they've been growing without any fertilization, without any pesticide, without any human intervention since the Second World War. Historical documents show people growing hemp on the same soil for up to 100 years. What we prefer, of course, is the idea of rotation with other crops, because one of the things you want to do is to create a living soil that's able to support the agricultural base. And so using hemp to do that, the hemp plant sends down its roots rather deeply into the ground. It has a taproot that goes down sometimes meters deep. That does two things. It protects it from drought, and it also allows it to bring up minerals from the subsoil, which then are grown up through the stalk into the leaves, and the plant sheds its foliage during the season, which then adds humus to the topsoil, protecting further the moisture, but also reinvigorating the soil. And also, because hemp is an annual plant, it dies at the end of each season. So that means that root structure inside, which has a taproot plus a root ball, it dies, and it leaves when it decomposes, it leaves aeration in the soil, so that's a benefit too. Plus, there's a lot of wildlife that survive on the seeds of the hemp plant and other things like that, using the leaves and the smaller sticks for nesting materials and so forth. So it supports an ecosystem within itself, which is very similar to a forest. It takes a lot of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and then it converts it into oxygen, O2, by virtue of photosynthesis, with hemp producing probably the most proficient mass of biomass per acre of almost any other crop that you can come up with in the in the temperate climate zone. That means it puts the most topsoil back in, because it grows it up and drops it back into the soil. And so if you don't take out all that foliage, then you're going to get better soil. If you do take it out, then you're going to need to fertilize it more. And that isn't to say that hemp doesn't do well with fertilizer, particularly organic fertilizer like manure. What it does mean is that it doesn't require the heavy chemical pesticides and fertilizers that other crops such as cotton and corn and things like that do. So again, we find that when we say that hemp can save the world, it has to be hemp in combination with sustainable agricultural techniques, not just hemp and then bad agricultural techniques. And similarly, hemp with a good environmentally stable industrial processing system and manufacturing, not hemp with poison, toxic, polluting kind of technologies. So you see that it's not an individual thing that hemp saves the world. It's hemp in this broader vision of how we can provide for the basic necessities of life, as well as consumer goods, and at the same time do it in a way that preserves the soil. One other thing to mention about hemp is, of course, that it produces 4 times as much pulp per acre on a sustainable basis as does timber or forest land, and so therefore, that's one of the very motivating factors for a lot of people, is that we never really need to cut another tree, and yet we can have all those jobs, the same jobs, working the pulp mills, working the shipping, working the paper making, and so forth, as we have now, just by giving the farmers that rather than the international logging industry, or certainly rather than cutting down trees and selling them to Japan to be stored underwater. We have ways of creating jobs that are going to be really good for Canada, good for the United States, good for America, good for the earth, all at the same time. That's why people use that expression that hemp can save the world.
All the books, it's illegal. We could have a $100,000 fine. Same with the paraphernalia, it's really illegal. We're breaking another law there. The fabric that we have is illegal. So we're breaking laws there. Our soaps are illegal because they're not labeled bilingually. They're just labeled in English. We're stamping our money, so that's illegal. We're promoting marijuana, that's illegal. Selling scales and screens, none of that's allowed as well. Just absolutely everything we do here is against rules.
How come my government didn't tell me that 80% of the world, they sent me to school, how come they didn't tell me until this century 80% of everything was hemp? How come they didn't tell me that the sails on ships were canvas? And the canvas is simply the Dutch pronunciation of cannabis. And canvas sails from all throughout time meant cannabis sails. And up until this century, those were marijuana sails. And the canvas-covered wagons that came west were cannabis-covered wagons. Marijuana-covered wagons. Why didn't they tell me that the ropes and the diapers and the flags and the books and the Bibles and the maps and all the books were made from hemp? Until 1880. About 80% of everything that was ever called paper was made from hemp, including the Gutenberg Bible.
To be talking about human rights as any other item, well, that don't mean anything. It's the violations of the human rights, say from time immemorial until the present day, that we are concerned about.
The international law on this subject is actually something that we should be accessing, because there are laws that define what a culture is and that make it illegal for a government to violate the cultures or to suppress the cultures of the people. And in the case of cannabis, there's extremely good arguments that it has a historical culture and also bears all the modern requirements to be considered a culture within society. And so therefore these laws are not what you would call prohibition, they're actually what you would call genocide. And that is strictly forbidden. With the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the anti-genocide treaties, we're in a position to force governments of Canada and the United States both to start acting like civilized countries instead of acting like some kind of fascist barbarian states that pick out certain segments of the population and then try to destroy them.
I think what your right is to be a citizen and to run for office and to get everybody out behind you. Teach them all the issues, that the #1 plan for paper fiber fuel, your rights to do medicinal herbs have been taken away from you, given to the pharmaceutical companies. Power is over you, are going to restrict your very lifestyle, and the government has already proven itself beyond any shadow of a doubt on their actions on the hemp to be the most dumbest, evilest, rottenest, stupidest government you could possibly have.
Everybody seems to want to do something, and that's great, but nobody quite knows what we want to do. Getting organized is important. Education is important. Talk to everybody. Show people the paper. Show people the clothing. Show people everything about this plan. And whether you take a standpoint on legalization or whether you take a standpoint on industrialization, it really doesn't matter. Do it all.
You can teach all these people this information, and you're going to overcome. Your enemies are going to become you, because they will not, most of them are not your enemies because they know things. They're your enemies because they don't know things. And as you teach them the information from that hemp is the Earth's #1 plant. It's its #1 plant for paper and fiber and fuel and medicine. It's greater in most cases than all the other plants on Earth combined. And you've said this over and over and over from every different angle.
Hemp was not introduced, say, on what they call a universal scale to be obtainable in drugstores. This was after 1923, mind you. And if it was outlawed, so that means the outlaw is put it into prison and just not refer to it. Before that, there were a lot of instances which had fallen into the therapeutic value that hemp provided to our grandmothers, grandparents, that we didn't question or ask what part of the body would this application or intake of hemp help or, give sustenance to. That wasn't the idea. The older folks, the grandparents, they had what they call a curricula all their own. What is good, what is not good, how to use it, and what not to use. They did not recommend smoking marijuana because nobody at that time smoked marijuana. They didn't know what it was all about. The leaves fell, and that was fertilization for the ground, for the soil. They were more interested in the therapeutic values, which is helping the ailing bodies, the fiber and the food. And, of course, instead of chocolates for the kids, hemp seed, a little bit roasted. Oh, that was a delicacy.